Imagine working as hard as you can for 10, 15, or even 20 years of your life to make it to the highest level of your chosen sport, only to be told you get 1 hour to show us what you can do, and if you're not fast enough, then bad luck, you're done. And you have to repeat this process week in and week out. All you have ever worked for is this chance to prove yourself, and you get just 60 minutes to determine whether your weekend continues or you pack up and go home. You, my friend, are a Formula One pre-qualifier. This is how we currently see our Formula One grid in 2023. 10 teams, 2 cars each, equals a total of 20 cars. The rules actually state that no more than 26 cars can start a Grand Prix. Today, we as fans could only dream of 26 F1 cars on the grid. But in the past, there has been 26 cars. In fact, there has been a lot more cars than that show up to a Grand Prix weekend. In 1989, for example, 39 cars showed up to compete, and with this many cars, the officials introduced a special qualifying system to try and sort out the 26 car starting grid. This system was called pre-qualifying. But let's rewind a little and have a brief look at the history of pre-qualifying. The first use of it was at the 1977 British Grand Prix, when amazingly 40 F1 cars arrived to take part in the weekend's Grand Prix. The final time pre-qualifying was used was at the 1992 Hungarian Grand Prix, when 31 cars attempted to make the field. In 238 races since the 1977 British Grand Prix, pre-qualifying sessions took place just 86 times. This was simply because it wasn't at every Grand Prix that over 30 cars showed up to race, so there was no need for a pre-qualifying session. Right, that's the brief history of it taken care of. Now let's get down to what pre-qualifying actually was. Time for some more math. We have already established that only 26 cars can take the start of a Grand Prix. But another little known rule is that only 30 cars are allowed to participate in qualifying. And if you ended up being 27 through to 30th fastest, then you fail to qualify and your weekend is finished. But when there is over 30 cars entered, this is where the pre-qualifying session comes into play. A 1 hour session would take place, usually on Friday mornings, and the idea was you had to go as fast as you could, and only the top 4 cars were allowed to advance into the official qualifying session. Finish 5th or below in the session, and it's all over, and you can start packing up and heading for the airport. All that way, possibly halfway around the world, and you only get 60 minutes to make it count. The pressure must have been immense for these drivers, knowing they only had 1 hour to get the job done, and anything could go wrong. You could have a mechanical issue within 5 minutes of the session starting, and depending on the severity of the issue, you are either finished or the team will be sent scrambling to try and fix it and get you back out there. You could of course also have an accident, be it a minor one or a major one. Either was completely possible. Setup of the car was paramount. You had to hope that the car rolled out of the truck fast and not require too many changes for you to get on the pace, as this would take time stuck in pit lane adjusting the car instead of on track setting a time. All kinds of things could go wrong. Other cars could get in your way while you were on a fast lap, destroying your lap time and a valuable set of tyres. Pre-qualifying certainly was intense. So, we've had a look at the history and also a look at what the session actually was. Now, we look at how it was decided who would have to take part in the pre-qualifying session. The way things were set up was fairly straightforward, to be honest, but also it could be deemed to be a little unfair, depending on your point of view. It all depends on your team's previous results. Let's look at the 1991 season, for example. There were 34 cars entered for the 91 season. Of those 34 cars, 4 were brand new cars with new teams, who had no previous results to draw upon, so they were automatically required to take part in pre-qualifying. This was the Jordan team, in what I think is one of the most beautiful F1 cars ever made, and the Modena Lamborghini team, which I think is a close second in the way of looks, and also one of my all-time favourite teams. But anyway, 4 other cars were placed into pre-qualifying as well, and they were there due to their previous year's results, which were, well, let's say poor. The Dallara team had 2 cars in pre-qualifying, and then there was the 2 single car teams of Fondmetal and Coloni. These were the 8 cars that took part in pre-qualifying at the first round of 1991 at Phoenix in the USA. At the halfway point of the season, however, an adjustment was made to the system based on how your team had performed in the first half of the year. If you had done well, you had an opportunity to move out of pre-qualifying. I will use the new Jordan team as the perfect example. They have produced not only a beautiful car, but a very quick race car. But being a new team, they had to pre-qualify. By the halfway point of the year, they had only failed to pre-qualify once due to an engine failure, and had managed to get through the official qualifying sessions as well and into the races. And because the car was very quick, they had even managed to finish some races in the points. They had done a good job, and better than some of the other teams that didn't have to pre-qualify. So at the halfway point of the season, they had worked their way out of pre-qualifying, and a lesser performing team had, sadly for them, worked their way into pre-qualifying. So that was essentially the idea. Get your car through the pre-qualifying session, which would move you into the top 30 cars, then get your car through the official qualifying sessions, and that would get you into the top 26 cars and onto the grid for the race itself. Then you had to try and last the entire race distance, and if you were fast enough, hopefully a top 6 points finish would be coming your way. Continue to do this for the first half of the season, and you stand a good chance of moving out of pre-qualifying, and not have to have that early morning alarm call every Friday to get to the track early for what many would call a lottery session. Putting all that aside, each and every driver had given their all for a large part of their lives to make it to Formula One, and in the end, they were greeted with this 1-hour session that decided their weekend's activities. It was harsh for sure, but there really wasn't any other way to do it until F1 decided to curtail the amount of cars that compete in F1 and make it only for the most professional teams as possible. Instead of 10 guys showing up with a car they hobbled together in a shop in the middle of nowhere. Pre-qualifying was amazing and terrible at the same time. I love it, and it is definitely my favourite era of Grand Prix racing, and I have great memories of it, but those days are long gone. But I also know there is a big passion for this era out there. Today the F1 paddock is squabbling over having 22 cars on the grid, and to me that's pretty sad. So to look back at the great era of pre-qualifying brings a smile to my face.